Hello everyone, this is Earl Twyman and welcome to another segment of Black History that everyone should know. Today's topic will be George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was an agricultural scientist and inventor who developed hundreds of products using peanuts, sweet potatoes, and soybeans. Born an African American slave a year before slavery was outlawed, Carver left home at a young age to pursue education and would eventually earn a master's degree in agricultural science from Iowa State University. He would go on to teach and conduct research at Tuskegee University for decades, and soon after his death, his childhood home would be named a national monument, the first of its kind to honor an African American. The early life of George Washington Carver. Born on a farm near Diamond, Missouri, the exact date of Carver's birth is unknown, but it is thought that he was born in January or June of 1864. 9 years prior, Moses Carver, a white farmer, purchased George's mother, Mary, when she was 13 years old. The elder Carver reportedly was against slavery, but needed help with his 240-acre farm. When Carver was an infant, he, his mother, and sister were kidnapped from the Carver farm by one of the bands of slave raiders that roamed Missouri during the Civil War era. They were sold in Kentucky. Moses Carver hired a neighbor to retrieve them, but the neighbor only succeeded in finding George, whom he purchased by trading one of Moses's finest horses. Carver grew up knowing little about his mother or his father. Moses Carver and his wife Susan raised the young George and his brother James as their own and taught the boys how to read and write. James gave up his studies and focused on working the fields with Moses. George, however, was a frail and sickly child who could not help with such work. Instead, Susan taught him how to cook, mend, embroider, do laundry, and garden, as well as how to concoct simple herbal medicines. At a young age, Carver took a keen interest in plants and experimented with natural pesticides, fungicides, and soil conditioners. He became known as the plant doctor to local farmers due to his ability to discern how to improve the health of their gardens, fields, and orchards. At age 11, Carver left the farm to attend an all-black school in the nearby town of Neosho. He was taken in by Andrew and Mariah Watkins, a childless African-American couple who gave him a roof over his head in exchange for help with household chores. A midwife and nurse, Mariah imparted on Carver her broad knowledge of medicinal herbs and her devoted faith. Disappointed with the education he received at the Neosho school, Carver moved to Kansas about 2 years later, joining numerous other African Americans who were traveling west. For the next decade or so, Carver moved from one Midwestern town to another, putting himself through school and surviving off his domestic skills he had learned from his foster mothers. He graduated from Minneapolis High School in Minneapolis, Kansas in 1880 and applied to Highland College in Kansas. He was initially accepted to the all-white college, but was later rejected when the administration learned he was black. In the late 1880s, Carver befriended the Mulhollands, a white couple in Winterset, Iowa, who encouraged him to pursue a higher education. Despite his former setback, he enrolled in Simpson College, a Methodist school that admitted all qualified applicants. Carver initially studied art and piano in hopes of earning a teaching degree, but one of his professors, Etta Budd, was skeptical of a black man being able to make a living as an artist. After learning of his interest in plants and flowers, Budd encouraged Carver to apply to the Iowa State University Agricultural School to study botany. In 1894, George Washington Carver makes black history by becoming the first African American to earn a Bachelor's of Science degree. Impressed by Carver's research on the fungi infections of soybean plants, his professors asked him to stay on for graduate studies. Carver worked with famed mycologist L. H. Pamel at the Iowa State Experimental Station, honing his skills in identifying and treating plant diseases. In 1896, Carver earned his Master of Agricultural degree and immediately received several offers, the most attractive of which came from Booker T. Washington from the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Washington convinced the university's trustees to establish an agricultural school which could only be run by Carver if Tuskegee was to keep its all-black facility. Carver accepted the offer and would work at Tuskegee Institute for the rest of his life. Carver's early years at Tuskegee were not without hiccups. For one, agricultural training was not popular. Southern farmers believed they already knew how to farm, and students saw schooling as a means to escape farming. Additionally, many faculty members resented Carver for his high salary and demand to have 2 dormitory rooms, one for him and one for his plant specimens. Carver also struggled with the demands of the faculty position he held. He wanted to devote his time to research in agriculture for ways to help the poor Southern farmers, but he was also expected to manage the school's 2 farms, teach, ensure the school's toilets and sanitary facilities work properly, and sit on multiple committees and councils. Carver and Booker T. Washington had a complicated relationship and would butt heads often, in part because Carver wanted little to do with teaching, though he was beloved by his students. Carver would eventually get his way when Washington died in 1915 and was succeeded by Robert Russell Moton, who relieved Carver of his teaching duties except for summer school. By this time, Carver already had great successes in the laboratory and community. He taught poor farmers that they could feed hogs acorns instead of commercial feed and enrich croplands with swamp muck instead of fertilizers. His idea for crop rotation proved to be the most valuable. Through his work on soil chemistry, Carver learned that years of growing cotton had depleted the nutrients from soil, resulting in low yields. But by growing nitrogen-fixing plants like peanuts and soybeans and sweet potatoes, the soil could be restored, allowing the yield to increase dramatically when the land was reverted to cotton a few years later. To further help farmers, he invented the Jessup wagon, a kind of mobile horse-drawn classroom and laboratory that is used to demonstrate soil chemistry. Through Carver's guidance, farmers were beginning to see the high yields of cotton that they were getting from Carver's crop rotation technique. But the method had an unintended consequence: a surplus of peanuts and other non-cotton products. Carver went to work on finding alternative uses for these products. For example, he invented numerous products from sweet potatoes, including edible products like flour and vinegar, and non-food items such as stains, dyes, paints, and writing ink. But Carver's biggest success came from peanuts. In all, he developed more than 300 food, industrial, and commercial products from peanuts, which included milk, Worcestershire sauce, punches, cooking oils, salad oil, papers, cosmetics, soaps, and wood stains. He also experimented with peanut-based medicines such as antiseptics, laxatives, and goiter medications. It should be noted, however, that many of these suggestions or discoveries remained curiosities and did not find widespread applications. In 1921, Carver appeared before the Ways and Means Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives on behalf of the peanut industry, which was seeking tariff protection. Though his testimony did not begin well, he described a wide range of products that could be made from peanuts, which not only earned him a standing ovation, but also convinced the committee to approve a high protective tariff for the common peanut. At this point in time, George Washington Carver became fondly known as the Peanut Man. Carver continued to grow his fame and his legacy. In the last 2 decades of his life, Carver lived as a minor celebrity, but his focus was always on helping people. He traveled to the South to promote racial harmony, and he traveled to India to discuss nutrition in developing nations with Mahatma Gandhi. Up until the year of his death, he also released bulletins for the public. Some of the bulletins reported on research findings, but many others were more practical in nature and included cultivation information for farmers, science for teachers, and recipe for housewives. In the mid-1930s, when the polio virus raged in America, Carver became convinced that peanuts were the answer. He offered a treatment of peanut oil massages and reported positive results, though no scientific evidence exists that the treatments worked. Carver died on January 5, 1943, at Tuskegee Institute after falling down the stairs of his home. He was 78 years old. Carver was buried next to Booker T. Washington on the Tuskegee Institute grounds. Soon after, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed legislation for Carver to receive his own monument, an honor previously only granted to presidents George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. The George Washington Carver National Monument now stands in Diamond, Missouri. Carver was also posthumously inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. If you enjoyed today's segment, please like and subscribe to our channel so we can present to you more Black history that everyone should know.